The views, opinions, and representations expressed on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network and its website are those of the hosts, guests, and participants, and are not necessarily those of or endorsed by the network, its affiliated stations and broadcasts, the management, other hosts, or advertisers of the network. The shows found on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network can, but do not necessarily, promote any particular lifestyle, belief, religion, political affiliation, or other personal practice. These shows are for entertainment purposes only and are not intended to treat, diagnose, and or claim any cure of disease or condition or give any medical or legal advice. You can advertise your business on Night Dreams Talk Radio and you will be heard worldwide. Why not contact us at nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com. Eric Cooper, S4 Radio, on Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. Gets deep into the paranormal.
Good evening or morning, depending where you are, and welcome to S4, the voice of Forest Moon Paranormal. We come to you live from the FMP headquarters in the beautiful mountains of Concrete, Washington, in the North Cascades. FMP is a highly active emergency response team for all aspects of the paranormal, from aggressive hauntings, alien interaction, Bigfoot and other cryptids, and everything in between is terrifying. So S4 is the voice where we discuss these things in detail. You can find S4 right here on Night Dreams Talk Radio. And for our local listeners, also on KSVU 90.1 FM from 10 to 12 p.m. Saturdays with our pre-recorded shows. So tonight, it's January 19th. We're excited to discuss Project Blue Book, the historical perspective along with the TV show. Is it really factual? Also, some information has come up to the public about MUFON. Is this a distraction, or is something really going on? So tonight we have Cole Wegleitner, our FMP Lore and Culture Research Specialist and owner of Statement of Sound DJ Services, Chris Dodge, our Extended Care Specialist in FMP, Dave Scott, Spaced Out Radio, our Keith Andrews, our Alien Race Specialist in FMP, and Michael Hall, our paranormal lawyer and founder of UFOI Team. So how are we doing tonight, guys?
Just
wonderful.
Greetings and salutations.
Excellent. You know, I gotta say, I don't have the History Channel, but they actually put the first episode on the History Channel's YouTube channel, so I was able to watch it. And then, of course, the second episode they didn't put on the YouTube channel, but you can always find it on the History Channel's website. Flatwoods Monster. Now that one always intrigued me. What do you guys think of the show?
It was awesome. There's no other way to put that.
You know, there ain't. I don't want to be a spoiler tonight, but it's going to wind up being a spoiler. You just got to watch it regardless. I kind of put it in, you know, I got some questions for the panel tonight because I'm curious. Who is the mystery woman and the mystery guy that they really haven't introduced yet? I have a theory. I think they're Russian spies wanting to see what Blue Book's doing. You know, that Project Blue Book was out in the 1940s, 50s, and it was the era of the nuclear bomb, which is a reason the government wanted to keep UFOs so secret, because they didn't want this big UFO flap, which they knew there was something to it, but they had to keep it quiet. So do you think those two are Russian spies?
Yes.
Looking at this from someone... Go ahead.
And actually, well, in the dramatic production that they put together, they're speaking Russian. Let's put it that way. So the implication is that these are Russian spies, which is kind of fascinating that they would throw that in to the mix in this production. By the way, if anybody has not seen this thing, if we can help describe to some of our listeners what this Project Blue Book is all about, it's just fascinating that they're putting so much time and money and heavyweight actors into this production about the U.S. Air Force's secret project back then. No one knew about it. From 1952 to 1969, where the Air Force, along with this Dr. J. Allen Hynek, an actual astrophysicist, astronomer, and they were trying to basically debunk initially these reports that were happening all over the country during that period of time, because they thought it was a distraction, basically, for the Air Force have to deal with these kinds of things. So, but the production value, the scenes, the sets, the costumes, everything is the 1950s. It's really well done.
You know, Cole and I were talking about this earlier, because if you look at the historical side of Dr. Hynek, he seemed a lot more skeptical in the historical reviews when he first came on board than that show is kind of portraying.
He seemed to get sucked in right at the first episode.
He did.
Like as soon as they visited that first site.
But at the same time, and we discussed this today, I know, but at the same time, you can't portray personality in documents. So I think they're trying to portray that side of the scientist. When he was sucked into the Project Blue Book, he thought he was going in as a scientist, and if there was nothing to disprove, it's not swamp gas. That airplane definitely didn't hit a weather balloon, but there was radiation and there was damage to the wing. So as a scientist, you're going to look at that and go, that wasn't a weather balloon. We crashed. We crashed an airplane. We duplicated what the experiencers saw and did, and we crashed the plane, but he didn't. So as a scientist, that's crazy. So something else is going on, and then you got the captain going, nope, it's a weather balloon. Already turned in the report.
Yeah. Well, you know, the history behind Dr. Hynek is that there was no indication that he was the crusader for the truth up until the time of the Michigan swamp gas event. And you hit the nail on the head there, Coop, when you said that, because I don't know if you remember what happened back then. Of course, the baby boomers would, us older folks. But in Michigan, there was this group of sightings that really hit the newspaper big time. And they needed to get something resolved because it was happening so often up there. And that just happened to be congressional member Gerald Ford's jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. So he called for a massive investigation of what's going on. Of course, then the Air Force sent Dr. Hynek up to that area to investigate. And what Dr. Hynek comes out and says after his few days there, whatever, talking with the authorities and all that kind of thing, was that it's very possible this was swamp gas that everybody saw. And what happened was that moment right there was a turning point in really the history of our country, where finally the witnesses had been fed up and had enough of all of these debunking explanations of what they are seeing all over the country. It wasn't just Michigan, but Michigan was kind of like the tipping point, where it blew back big time for the Air Force. Even the local law enforcement, who, of course, live in that area and were responding to these reports, were seeing the same things that their witnesses were. And the Air Force and Dr. Hynek at that point were basically saying that everyone was misidentifying swamp gas. And, of course, at that point, all of a sudden the blowback happened, big PR problem for the military at that point. And that is supposedly the tipping point for Dr. Hynek, where he started to realize, oh, my God, the lid, we can't get the lid on this thing very long, and I am losing my credibility big time if I don't really get down to the bottom of this. So that happened, late. I think it was in the 60s, actually, that happened. Mm-hmm. So it'd been quite a while before they started this program, and he was just doing what he was asked to do up to that point.
You know, and Goof on Radio is bringing up a good point. The Russians didn't need to watch his wife unless they thought that was a way to get into the house, to see the office, to kind of see what kind of information she was learning from her husband. That'd be the only thing I could think of. Now, Chris.
Well, no, pillow talk.
Well, and that's possible too. She had a crush on her, I think.
Well, no, but I mean, between the husband and the wife, if he mentions anything to her, who better to confide in than her best friend?
Well, I can also tell you, we being in the cavalry right along the checkpoint Charlie. I can't talk tonight. In Germany, we had to take SAIDA courses, and it's subversion and espionage against the U.S. government. And it was a known fact that the Russians used women as spies all the time to gain information, to gain trust, but usually from male soldiers, not from the females. So they could use them either or, but primarily they did use them. The females were focused on the men. Now, real quick, I want to bring Chris in because Chris has been on the team for about a year now and has been learning about the UFO side and whatnot. I want to get your take on Blue Book. What have you learned?
It's very, when I was watching it, it was almost like my jaw was dropping. You hear things like you're correct. The rest of the panel is so much more experienced in this than I am. And, you've heard things, you've heard of all this cover up. But I think the thing that got me is, I could understand just by hearsay, people calling in, I saw this, I hear this, and you think, okay, the government's like, yeah. Well, that wasn't a UFO, and I figured, maybe they'd drop it like that. I did not realize the amount of paperwork and the effort that the government has taken to cover this up. It is absolutely jaw-dropping to me to watch the effort that they've taken to do this. And it drives me nuts to have to wait 6 days to see the next episode.
Well, the next episode, going by the previews, is really going to be a turning point. Because, the next episode just looks completely crazy. Compared to, we know that they did dogfights with Foo Fighters in Craft in the Sky back then. That wasn't a surprising case. Flatwoods Monster, and some people will get offended, but I can actually see Concrete reacting the way they did in the Flatwoods episode. Completely. Let's go find this creature. Let's go blow it up. Oh, there is no creature. She made it up. Oh, let's go after her now. I can see Concrete exactly. Because, you know as well as I do, Michael, back in the 1900s with the Orson Welles incident, when the power went out in Concrete, right after they heard this Orson Welles newscast come on, and everybody grabbed their guns because they really thought there was an alien invasion going on because the power went off the whole community right as they were starting the news broadcast.
Oh, man, I tell you what, I'm glad you mentioned that, Eric, because this is a great analogy of what you're talking about here. Because if people don't know the story of how Concrete, Washington, the small little community of Concrete, basically was the tipping point that put the entire United States into a panic mode in 1930 when Orson Welles did his War of the Worlds broadcast. I need to get people up to speed on this fascinating local slant to the story. And I don't want to interrupt your thought pattern, but I thought this would be a good place to bring people up to speed on what's going on in your local neck of the woods there from where you are there, Coop. In 1930, Orson Welles was 24 years old. Can you imagine this? And this guy was already had been a Broadway genius director. He was very famous for taking historical novels and turned them into stage plays. Of course, on radio, that was a perfect fit. So he was doing this on radio. And, of course, back in those days, radio was it. There was no television. This was everybody in the United States sitting around their big, giant console radios after dinner, the whole family, by the way, and listening to all the wonderful radio shows coming live from some ballroom at the top of the Astoria Hotel in New York City or wherever it was.
And real quick, Michael, to add to that, you got to understand back in the 1930s, that was a family event. The whole family, the kids included, would gather around the radio. I mean, think of the fireside chats.
Yes. As a matter of fact, just before the kids got to bed, they got actually after dinner to sit around maybe an hour or so with the family and enjoy those things. And here's what was the biggest hit going back then. It was Charlie McCarthy. The comedy shows were king back then. And Edgar Bergen, the famous ventriloquist, had his character Charlie McCarthy, and they would have a wonderful show for about an hour or so at about 8 o'clock. But here's the genius of Orson Welles. Orson Welles was the young upstart, trying to compete with the big networks out there and the big shows that were gobbling up most of the audience. He realized that when he was doing his productions that he couldn't compete right off the top of the hour with these large, very popular shows like Edgar Bergen. So what he did is he crafted his weekly scripts. And they only had a week to do this, by the way. They're doing a show, an entire play every week on this Mercury live radio theater that they had. But he would craft his scripts so that at the first commercial break, at about 15 minutes after the top of the hour, when they would go to the Lux soap commercials and, they would cut away to some music from some ballroom and things like that while they get ready for the next part of the show, he would actually craft his scripts to be totally engrossing at that very point. So when people were spinning the dial, because that's what they did back in the old days, when a commercial came on, just like we used to do with the old television sets, we'd surf around, see if there's something else that was interesting. And they came across full-blown, right in the middle of the War of the Worlds, and the Martians were landing in upstate New York. So basically that happened. Now, the coincidence is, I'll get to the bottom line real quick. The coincidence was that while the entire country was being pulled over to the Orson Welles broadcast because of the commercial break that happened on Edgar Bergen's show, Concrete, Washington, coincidentally, by the way, no one's ever really figured out why, the entire town suffered a power outage that turned everything off, lights, electricity, and it plunged the entire community, the mountain community of Concrete, Washington, into blackness, which totally panicked everyone, of course, in the local town. And everyone got on the phones, everyone did the telegraph thing, whatever they could do to find out what's really going on. And of course, everybody's, going crazy. We think we're being attacked out here in the state of Washington. Now, that got picked up by the AP UPI wire services immediately, went around the world and started the entire panic that supposedly happened during that broadcast because of what really weird things happened at the same time the broadcast was going on out here in the state of Washington.
Now, and the bottom line of that is you've got a small mountain community that goes completely black in the middle of they don't even get to hear that it was a story. They thought it was a news broadcast, breaking news. Martians have landed in New York. If you've ever heard of the actual Orson Welles broadcast, that's exactly how it starts. And
the reason is because Welles had crafted this script that he knew the commercial break was going to happen, and he knew exactly when people were going to turn into the show, and they did not hear the caveat at the very clear caveat at the beginning of the top of the hour.
Right.
This is stage play, the whole thing. This is our weekly kind of broadcast that we do about some kind of historical book. They all missed that. Everyone missed that, and basically in the United States, because they're all listening to the popular show initially.
So the reason I'm bringing that up is because if you saw the Flatwoods episode of Blue Book, and how they treated that woman in, a small community, and it's now in the news. Now the government's going to show up. Now J. Allen Hynek is there. They don't know who J. Allen Hynek is, but, they don't like the government to begin with back then. And here comes the government. They all have guns. They're all about to string this poor woman up because her kids saw a Martian in their eyes. And they couldn't find it, so she's making it up. So, I can see the small town community doing the exact same thing. That's just how small mountain communities are. And
I have a couple questions for the panel also when you get done, Eric.
Mm-hmm. But that's the bottom line, and that's why I brought that story up, because that story pretty much parallels close to the same, within 20 years of the Flatwood Monster, and same mindset, same American mindset. And, and then it progresses. Because out of, I can't remember how many thousand cases Blue Book actually investigated, but there were 700 of them they couldn't identify.
Eric, I live in a small town as well of about 1,000 people, and the area where I live, they're about 10 minutes away, is another community of about 1,800 people here in British Columbia. And back in September of 1988, Miriam Delicato was abducted right out a mile outside our town.
Right.
And it is one of the, if you're into ufology, you know that it is one of the best recorded alien abduction stories. And what a lot of people in small towns like to do, especially in my town, there are a bunch of people who've been here 30, 40 years who do not want to talk about this subject because they think having their town associated with such an event that it embarrasses the community. It is something that is very, very antisocial. It is something that people will laugh at the community, and the people in there is a bunch of rednecks who don't know what the heck they are talking about and are just a bunch of yeehaws who probably smoke too much pot, drink too much, and have a bad dental plan. And that is very, very, telling of the public, because there have been people here who have lived here for 30, 40 years. They're like, oh, yeah, I have heard about that story, but I don't know anything about it. I don't know anything about it. And here I am saying, why don't you put a plaque up at the area where it happened? It's a great tourist attraction. Tourism brings money. But it's that small town attitude that does not allow people to think outside the box at what could bring more revenue. So, yes, I understand what you're saying about small community.
Well, and they don't want that kind of publicity. Now, we have the Eagle Fest. They want the tourism for eagles. They're a little more lenient towards Bigfoot. They would like the Bigfoot crowd, but when it comes to UFOs, when it comes to aliens, oh no, that's taboo. That's just the sad reality. Now, Chris, you had a couple questions.
Yeah, just curious on how did this come about, the release of Blue Book? Who released this information to make this movie? And to the panel that's way more experienced than me, how do you think this is, because it's already airing, how is this currently affecting disclosure? Because my opinion is, for all the skeptics, there's your proof.
I think I'll address the second question, because the first part of it, I believe a lot of that was brought out through the Freedom of Information Act. Second part, I believe this is a part of the disclosure movement. kind of a first kickoff of 2019, because like I've said in the show before, 2018 you saw the New York Times article, then you saw Tom DeLonge, you saw the Space Force comment, you saw a couple other, but I think this is kind of a part of the movement of the ones that want disclosure versus the part of the government that still doesn't want it and won't allow it to happen.
Right,
I will disagree with you on that one, Eric.
Okay.
I think that from what I know of UFO television, that is some of the highest rated programming on television is when you discuss UFOs. That's why the X-Files was so popular in its time slot for so long. That's why Star Trek was so popular even in reruns and the remakes and re-editions of the show to make it happen. I don't think for a second the public who is watching this, whether or not they believe in UFOs, will truly understand that this show is based on real cases. I really don't.
So I've got a question for you on that, Dave, because Star Trek is classified science fiction. X-Files, a lot of people saw that as science fiction, although we know most of the X-Files were based on fact in some form or fashion. I think society will accept it if it's in the science fiction genre, but look at Hangar 1. Hangar 1, which was a MUFON-based case file documentary type show. And I believe it was taken off the air. Was it not?
And now you've got Blue Book, which is factual with the documentation to back it. And then I don't know if you guys have seen it, but they also have what's that show? Area 51. Roswell. They have a show called Roswell, which I watched, which is completely like a soap opera. So now you have a factor against a soap opera that's on. So more confusion to the people.
Is Roswell that kind of a soap opera-ish about the boy that's supposed to be an alien and his sister, and they crash on Earth and whatnot?
Yeah, it's two brothers and a sister that are aliens, and they do their powers and
yeah. But that came out several years ago. It seems like it's making a comeback, but they stopped after I think season 3 on that one.
Yeah, they just stopped it. I mean, there's no information about Roswell per se, but it's just, the aliens that lived in that town.
Right.
But like Dave said, some people aren't going to believe it, and then look what you've got. You've got a factual against a sitcom. So,
and what's interesting is they're bringing Blue Book up kind of we know it's based on real files, but it's being brought up like X-Files.
Yeah.
Where you have characters and you're getting to know the characters and kind of another drama
instead
format.
of a documentary. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So maybe that's the way they're presenting it, so it doesn't get taken off the air.
I'll tell you an interesting story. A couple of years ago on Spaced Out Radio, I had a gentleman named Rob Mercer, who runs MV UFOs, which is Miami Valley UFO Society out of Ohio. So one day he goes to a garage sale that he finds on Craigslist, and he's always looking for neat stuff. He picks up this box that has a bunch of documents in it. So he says, how much for this box? And it's like $5 or whatever it is. So he paid the $5, looks inside the box, and there were files upon files of released documentation of Project Blue Book, unclassified or declassified material. Mm-hmm. I actually, after I interviewed him, he actually sent me some of these documents and photographs that have been unclassified that I have sitting on my desk right in front of me right now from Project Blue Book.
That was like the find of a century, huh?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, absolutely. Including I have in my hand right now the government's UFO analysis sheet, which has date, location, date, time, group. Was there any photos, physical specimens, source? Was it military or civilian? What type of observation? The length of observation, number of objects, the course they were flying. Was there satellites in orbit at that time? Astronomical phenomena? Was it a meteor, star, or planet? Was it an aircraft, a balloon? Insufficient data? Others, including reflection, inversion present, photo analysis, sundog, lenticular cloud, or physical specimen analysis. Then a brief summary of the sighting, an actual sheet here of their report, and actually I got two of them, and their case categories. But I actually have two photos of UFOs that were unclassified by Project Blue Book. I'm holding them right now. One is numbered 51, one is numbered 186. Both numbers are drawn on pencil on the background, and they are from the Foreign Technology Division, AFCS, unclassified black and white photos of these craft.
Now,
well, you know what the Foreign Technology Division was headed by? Colonel Corso.
Yes.
That's fascinating stuff.
and,
yes.
You know, have you ever read Day After Roswell by Philip Corso?
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, for our listeners, for anyone that wants a good book, pick up Day After Roswell, for sure. Keith, are you still with us? Did Keith drop again?
I think so.
Ah, okay.
And for you Washingtonians, this one report, History of the Project, which is in my hand, which is a 3-page document, starts off with, following the Kenneth Arnold sighting on 24th of June, 1947, wide news coverage of public reports of flying discs or saucers created sufficient concern at high military echelons to authorize AMC to conduct a preliminary investigation into these reports. That led to, and it has a bunch of dates on here, that led to, it also mentions J. Allen Hynek. It also mentions Dr. Paul Fitz, Air Weather Service, Dr. G. Valley, a number of different names on here. It is just intriguing what is out there. Absolutely intriguing.
Oh, that is fascinating, Dave. Let me jump in here and just ask you to clarify. Are you saying that Dr. Hynek is mentioned in that document on or around 1947, well before Project Blue?
I will read it right now. It says, give me a couple seconds here. It says, after Project Sign report, work continued along the same lines.
Resend your call to our voice message.
Inner voice.
You might want to hang up on
Isn't available right now. When you hear the beep, record your message.
It's us, our Keith. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So this says, after Project Sign report, work continued along the same lines, and a Project Grudge report was published and released in August 1949 by AMC. This report contained analysis of 244 cases and concluded that unidentified flying objects reports resulted from A, misinterpretation of conventional objects, B, mass hysteria or war nerves, C, hoaxes, and or D, psychopathological persons. Based upon these conclusions, AMC recommended that investigation and study of this type of report be reduced in scope. Major portions of this work were performed under contract by Ohio State University Professor Hynek, present consultant to Air Force on Project Blue Book, the Rand Corporation, Dr. G. Valley, Dr. Paul Fitz, Air Weather Service, 3610th Electronic Section of the U.S. Weather Bureau. So yes, he was included in 1949.
And, by the way, you mentioned J. Vallée. Jacques Vallée was involved there.
Dr. G is in George. G is in George Valley. Valley.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, no Vallée
problem.
didn't come into the picture until I don't think about the 1980s or so.
Yeah.
I believe he wrote a couple books in the 70s, but he, to my knowledge, Vallée didn't have anything to do with Blue Book.
So this also says here, which takes us back to Eisenhower, it says, by 1953, Air Force responsibility for the UFO program had become firmly established. It was now apparent that some directives were necessary in order to standardize investigative procedures and formulate policy.
Man, these are great documents. This is a find of a century, as Chris was saying here.
Yeah, well,
So that shows us
glad
the point that Hynek knew of, had studied about UFOs and aliens before Blue Book, which does differ from the show.
Dr. Hynek had worked with the Air Force prior to Blue Book on other projects. That much we know.
But it mostly talked about telemetry sensor, didn't it? Or some
Yes,
not
you're right.
telemetry sensor.
You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So, but it in the show they don't actually mention that he ever. They almost make it seem like he had never had any type of contact with Sign or what was the other one? Grudge.
Yeah, Sign or Grudge.
Yes. Here's an actual dogfight case with a UFO. So this happened on the 18th of November, 1948, 2200 hours at Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland. The pilot of a T-6 reported seeing an object over the base at 1,700 feet. Object was an oblong ball with one light, no wings, no exhaust, in landing light of T-6. It had dull gray glow and was thought to be smaller than T-6. Pilot made passes and object evaded by going above aircraft. T-6 tried to close in very tight climbing turns, but object turned inside the aircraft. Object was lost after 10 minutes at 7,500 feet. Its speed seemed to vary between 80 miles an hour. The typing is very hard here. 30 miles per hour and 60 miles an hour. The object described was a synoptic balloon. It has been showed that it is very difficult for the observer to separate target motion and his own motion even in daylight, and practically impossible to do so at night. This fact has been substantiated by pilots who, in controlled experiments, attacked ordinary balloons with a T-6 in daylight with knowledge of what the object was and what it did. All of the above described maneuver were duplicated in appearance.
That's episode 1.
Bingo.
Coming soon to History Channel near you.
But yeah, these documents are absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Now, I want to bring up, Roswell happened in 47. The Maury Island incident happened in 47. Blue Book didn't happen until what, 52?
Right.
So
but it was the result of the prior projects, too.
And it kind of shows you the mindset, that the Air Force was not skeptical by this time of UFOs, because they'd already had multiple incidents. Kenneth Arnold with the sightings over, Mount Rainier heading towards Spokane. The Roswell, I believe the Russian Roswell incident happened somewhere in between there. Which could actually bring in why the Russians would be interested in why there was a Project Blue Book when they already had their own Russian Roswell.
Well, don't forget too, Eric, that they were also very intrigued with what was happening in the nuclear arms race at that time in New Mexico. That was a very, very difficult and political time.
Oh, most definitely, most definitely. I'm just trying to show a parallel. Were the Russians interested in the nuclear arms race, or were they actually interested in Project Blue Book? Because it could go either way.
Yeah, they could have thought Blue Book was a cover-up for the arms race.
Very, very possible. But the Russians had their own UFO projects going on as well. Chris, what's your thoughts?
I'm still thinking about these letters that Dave was reading. Those are, like, amazing. Wow.
So you had another question as to far as what's it mean for today.
Yeah.
You know, I think shows like Roswell, shows like Blue Book, the more they bring these out to the public and they show them like Blue Book is doing as fact, it makes the field of ufology more acceptable and more open each time they produce a show like this. So when you have a team like FMP that deals with these issues, it's going to bring out more people that's going to ask more questions.
You just wonder, or I sat and wondered when I was watching this movie of some of the older generation that may be sitting at home watching these movies and thinking, I knew I saw something. I knew it was real. You know what I mean? It's like, wow, it's coming out now for some of the way older generation.
And, you know, perfect point. And a question I want to bring up. So what does everyone think?
Oh.
The mindset of the older generation that went through, that they were younger during Blue Book, and they're still alive today, and even through the 70s with Travis Walton, with, some of the more famous abduction scenarios, versus Generation Z and Generation X we see today. Do you think the younger generation is going to be more open to UFOs because of the events that have happened in the last 50, 60 years?
No. And I say that fast is because I think the older generation, they've basically lived with it, and a lot of people will not get accustomed to real new things, if that makes sense. The older generation, I think, has had this information in the back of their head, but just needed something like Project Blue Book to make it a reality for them. And the new generation, if it doesn't consist of a computer game, they're not going to understand it.
Okay, but for argument's sake, and looking at the new generation, the older generation had to accept it. They were fed the information. The newer generation, with all the movies coming out, with the TV shows coming out, don't you think they're getting more involved and more intrigued?
On that, I will say I think that the new generation, it's not going to be Project Blue Book that helps them accept. It's going to be the shows like Roswell where they actually get engrossed in the show. They actually find themselves really entertained, because that's who that show is geared towards.
Yeah, it's a teeny bopper love show is really what it is.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Sorry, Cam.
This isn't an insult towards the newer generations, but the attention spans have significantly shortened.
Well,
they're watching the show, they're thinking about 15 different things at the same time, and that thought process is going to start with the idea of those shows.
Well, I think technology advances are what shortens the attention span. Everyone's focused on a telephone, a cell phone. or a some kind of electronic device. People don't look up. They don't look straight. They look down. I think when they see the show Roswell, they're going to go, "Oh, that's cool. Maybe that could be possible." But it's not factual. It's still not giving them proof. That is just almost like it's a soap opera. It's not a soap opera even. It's just a sitcom show.
Yeah, it's just a show. There's no facts. I mean, who in this generation is going to believe that these two brothers and sister were raised at Roswell and hid their identity of being an alien for so many years? The new generation isn't going to believe that.
But this new generation is also born very skeptical of factual items.
The new generation is going to have to see a UFO. That's what's going to get the new generation.
I see that, yeah.
Agreed.
Yes.
And what I see the other problem is they're being fed that everything but Fox is fake news. You see that all the time. So what is the new generation going to believe? They're not going to try
and look at
I'm not even bringing up
Comic-Con.
I'm not even bringing up politics here. This isn't even a political thing. But they're being told on the news all the time what's fake and what's not, when in all reality, they're all fake. I completely agree. They're going to have to see something in the skies before they'll believe it.
Well, and look at the huge, huge following of these Comic-Cons. And those are just, shows and movies, but it's all fake. And look at the people that follow it. They're going to have to see something. A reality has to hit them upside the head before this new generation is going to believe it.
And you're absolutely right. And Kayla brings it up in the chat room that, it's the YouTube generation. And I hate to say it, but 90% of what you see on YouTube is CGA.
Mm-hmm.
It's fake. But
you also have to think, let's get into the families a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many families of skeptics out there that, oh no, there's no UFOs. A lot of the kids are believing this, so it's going to take that much more to even get them to realize it. And that is not just one family, but that's generations of non-believers.
Yeah. Agreed. And we brought it up on the show before, but Cole and I were even talking about it tonight. In that it's paranormal kids that are going to have a big shoes to fill, and will be the next step up. And there's not many of them.
Well, that just means that all these listeners on this radio show are going to have to help convince everybody else.
Exactly, and that's why S4 is around.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. They're real. Just so you know, okay?
You got shoes to fill. Michael, what's
your
thoughts?
Does that help?
You still with us, Michael?
You want me to jump in there?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, well, I think you're going to get a counterpoint from me here. I'll tell you what. At this point in the conversation, I think we're totally underestimating the Gen Xers, the millennials, the new guys on the block. They are totally different human beings on this planet compared to who we were growing up and what we had to learn growing up. These kids, these young people, are so in tune. Their consciousness level seems to be higher, much higher than we had ever thought of when we were when I was in the 1950s and even the 60s, which was, supposedly the Enlightenment age, for our generation. These kids basically already know all these things are real. They really do. They are so close to the reality of the future that they are not going to be shocked at all about the revelations that I believe are coming very quickly down the road. With Dave Scott, just coming out tonight with some of these Project Blue Book things. and the fact that the mainstream medias now are talking about this subject without the snicker factor, all that stuff. These young kids have been born with it. They are on top of it. And the fact that they have maybe shorter attention spans than we did at their age is basically going to be doing them a good service in the future, because these guys are connected literally with the world 24 hours a day. If you haven't heard, but young kids nowadays are not rushing to get their driver's licenses. They don't have to go down to the local soda shop like we used to do in a car to see all their friends. They are in constant contact with people around the world their own age, and they are talking about these subjects all the time. So anyway, that's my counterpoint to this whole thing, and it's very, very fascinating.
And I would agree. Back in our generation, we had to go to the library to find books on this topic. Today, they've got the internet, which you're absolutely right. Everything is right there at their fingertips. So, excellent point.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things that I want to say on that too is I have, like, when my daughters tell their friends what I do for a living, they are completely intrigued with the topic. This younger generation is a bunch of believers. And here's the other thing that I have heard in my discussions with other researchers on and off the record, that the generations from the 40-year-olds on up, the government does not give a care about what we believe and what we do not. The younger generation, that below 40 crowd, does not even worry about what the older generations think. The older generations are the ones who are worrying about, you know, and I hate to bring a religious context into this, but they still believe their government. They still believe, you know, their churches and their pastors and what people there are telling them. They are not interested in redefining what they believe for the most part. All right. However, the younger generations who are, say, still in single digits, like my children, your children, Eric, who are in their teenage years now, into their early 20s, those kids are more prepared for any type of ET disclosure than our generation ever will be. And they will be able to understand it and accept it more than our generation, because the younger generations are moving away from the churches. They are trying to define their own spirituality and their own beliefs on their own, rather than someone telling them what they are supposed to believe, what they are supposed to think. And that's where the younger generation will get the disclosure movement. Our generation will not.
And, you know, you hit it right on the head, because Craig's in the chat room and he said Gen X and below don't have the dogma. And that's exactly what you said. They don't have religion breathing down their neck like we did growing up. I'm
just surprised Craig and I agree on something.
And well, it's a perfect point. You know, because you know, when you talk religion, some beliefs out there think everything's a demon, aliens included. And if they don't have that dogma, they're going to have a more open mind to accept the alternative theories out there.
100%. And that's the big issue right now. That's the big issue. We don't matter. The people who already have 1 foot in the grave do not matter. And let's face it, once you hit 50 years old, your expiry date increases sufficiently.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks, Dave.
Hey, I'm only 4.25 years away as well. So the conversation somewhat does include me as well.
And I'm 50 next
month.
Good.
I'm gonna stop and wait for you.
Well, that's I'll let you mess the hair. But when you think about it, it does make sense. Why disclose to people who are going to have an increasing chance of panic and violence when you can take the younger generation and hand it all to them, and they're going to say, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do this.
You don't think, Dave, you don't think that the older generation was raised, let's say, I'm going to use different wording here, in a reality, and the younger generation is raised in all this computer stuff. You don't see the big difference there, and you don't agree that the older generation would accept it more so than the newer?
Real quick. I'm going to say the older generation was also raised in science fiction. That's where science fiction started, was in the 30s and the 40s with the amazing stories in Fate magazine, which Fate magazine is full of real stories, but a lot of science fiction started in the 30s and the 40s. Mm-hmm. So although they were started in reality with, oh my God, there's Foo Fighters and there's crazy things in the sky and people are being taken in the 60s with the Betty and Barney Hill case and many others. But, I think technology is the leap where they actually get the information at their fingertips. That is a different reality.
I think that's
you got to think. The most fantastic man in the world, who was very much a man in those days, was an alien. And it was a man that thousands of kids from your guys' generation read about.
Superman.
And that's Superman.
Yep.
Yeah, but I mean, don't forget though, that was all made, Cole, on imagination. All the major superheroes and everything were made on imagination. They weren't based on reality of little gray dudes running around taking you. Okay, it wasn't until Roswell happened that people of that generation had any inkling whatsoever. Everything was made up, and you had a very gullible audience as well, going back to War of the Worlds with Orson Welles. Okay, you had a very gullible situation there and a gullible crowd because it was something different that wasn't explored. They still ran to their churches. Up until 30 years ago, people were still filling churches. And
there
today,
again, I'll bring in with the younger generation. Now, instead of running to churches, we are running to Comic-Con. And it's not out of fear. Like, it's out of fear. Our world is so messed up right now that we're wishing Harry Potter was real, because if you're an orphan who doesn't have a family, you can go live with the magic people.
I agree with that.
I understand where you're going, but on the UFO subject and the spirituality subject and on the consciousness subject, you talk to anybody who is in this field, anybody who is under the age of 30 is a lot more divinely intertwined with their own spirituality than they are of people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, whether or not you believe in God. And I will go on record and say I'm a God believer. But there are people out there who are moving away from the church because it's been indoctrinated in them that if it's not the church's way, you're going to hell. All right. Whereas we are allowing our children today to find their own spirituality. That's why almost every church out there is suffering with their congregation, suffering for donations, suffering for their tithing, is because the younger generation has moved away because they aren't following for the dictatorship that many churches and many religions have been over the years. Now, that isn't a shot at religion, and I want to go on record and say that. It's not a shot. Many people have improved their lives because of religion. But as long as people are able to open up their minds and expand their consciousness and expand their way of thinking, the church is going to suffer and is not going to be able to have the stranglehold on anything. Why do you think it's only been the last 15 years, 10 years, that the Roman Catholic Church has come out and said, we have been studying UFOs? The Pope coming out a couple of years ago, Pope Francis, saying if aliens landed on this planet and wanted to be baptized, I would baptize them because they are God's creatures. We are making strides toward that. The older generation thought the Pope was nuts for saying that. The younger generation said, right on, Pope Francis, you got it covered.
Well, I do have my own theory on that, but because I am a Catholic, I can't say it because they'll probably try and crucify me.
They're watching you. Our Keith is our Keith's not with us because he got dropped. He's having computer issues, but he's saying in the chat room a huge problem with the younger generation striving to figure things out for themselves with no guidance is the reality of the challenges that man went through getting to this point.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. Yep.
And I don't see a problem with that. I really don't. I think people need to find themselves instead of listening to the dogma of a man behind the pulpit that's making his own interpretation of a religious text. That's the bottom line.
And I do see where a lot of the younger generation has gone.
If you would like to hear Night Dreams Talk Radio on your local radio station, let them know. Tell them to check out www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. And thank you.
Eric Cooper, S4 Radio, on Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, gets deep into the paranormal.
Welcome back to S4 tonight. We're talking Project Blue Book. What's fiction and what's real? Hope you're all enjoying tonight's show. So you can also find the archives at our Spreaker site and on the S4 YouTube channel for all the shows you missed in the last 2 years. Anyway, back to the show. And before we get to our listener's question, Cole, finish what you were talking about real quick.
Okay, so I can see how a lot of kids today, like the younger generation, are getting more in touch with their spirituality. But at the same time, you can also see how more of them, yes, they're leaving the church, but they're heading straight towards fantasy worlds to fill in that void. And the problem is with that, with the video games, the movies, everything that is becoming more and more realistic as you see it, they are becoming desensitized completely, not only to like factual items, but everything in their life. They are so desensitized that movies that scared us as kids are comedies to them.
Yeah, I could agree with that, having a 7 and an 8-year-old.
So the problem is, like, we're looking at disclosure as an item that it's not going to be, it's going to be us being revealed that aliens are real, compared to it could be something where the alien war that we've heard is going on, that we are just a speck of, we suddenly become involved in, and these kids aren't going to be able to do anything about it because they're desensitized to it.
But yes and no. Desensitized, I don't think is an accurate portrayal. I think in some cases, which, the kids I'm talking about are a minority to all of them, but I think prepared is more what they need to be. I want to get to a question, though, real quick. Sharon's in the chat room. She wants to know, what about the government creating a false flag alien invasion on Earth before people find out the truth? Does anyone have any input on that one?
Sure. This is Michael, of course, and what's really I see happening is when you take a big picture look at what's going on in this fast disclosure that is just ramping up rapidly from just 1 year ago, I believe, is that there is something coming down the road that is pushing this agenda so quickly right now. And the powers that be know that something is coming. They know that disclosure is going to happen eventually. And I believe they're needing to get ahead of the spin. They need to they already realize that once actual disclosure happens, they're going to be in bad shape. They're going to lose power. They're going to be unnecessary in some cases. And in a lot of cases, there's going to be retribution that's going to be, like, payback is going to be huge on this thing. People will realize at one point that, oh my gosh, if you knew that now, when did you first know that? And how long have it's been kept from us? That kind of thing. So what's happening at this point, I believe, is that the powers that be are either going to try to do this false flag event and try to couch it in the terms of this being a threat, and that we need to band together and we need to impose martial law and we need to protect everyone from this outside aggressor, UFOs or whatever you call them. So I think that's going to be part of a spin. And you've all heard of Project Bluebeam and those kinds of things that supposedly have the technology to kind of pull that off.
Well, Space Force comes to mind. Are they going to build a wall in space to keep the other aliens out? But,
bubble.
And I'm going to tread on the political side here lightly, but we brought this up last week. And we've all known there's been a refugee problem in this country for a long time. There's no crisis at the border that's being portrayed. My honest opinion. I had a son-in-law that was deported 3 times. He was back in Seattle the next day. That's how easy it was to get back over the border. But that was 10 years ago. Is there a bigger problem now? I don't think so. So I'll ask you again, and you're going to say bingo. But what is the distraction? Why are they focused on a wall right now? What's really going on? Michael?
It's a distraction. Got to keep people away from what's really going on. So, all this political fomentation of, the various things we hear on Fox News and, the talking heads arguing with one another. It's just a distraction. Try to fill in the time that people are awake and keep them either confused or, in trepidation about something. And as long as they can do that, they keep people from being, interested or focused on what is the important stuff.
Like Project Blue Book?
Well, no, Project Blue Book is just part of the spin that's coming down the road with mainstream media and production companies and movie companies coming out with this stuff to red pill the public. They need to get enough people up to see what they don't want is they don't want panic themselves. They know something is going to happen. And they are in the process of trying to disclose it their way so that when whatever is going to happen comes down the road, they don't have to deal with the public backlash. They're going to try to get ahead of that and try to lead this public, big wave in a certain direction. So that's part of Project Blue Book and all these new things that you see in the mainstream media about UFOs and the Harvard astronomers talking about Oumuamua, maybe being an alien probe, all that stuff. It's just astronomical what's going on right now in the mainstream media.
And I've got to say, Kayla's in the chat room saying the government needs an outside force to blame for your problems. Why not ETs? And the first thing that popped into my head was Ronald Reagan at the UN Security Council, where he said almost those exact same words.
I do know why they need the distraction, I think.
What's that?
The Hostess factory actually did close, and they are running out of stockpiles of Twinkies. This world is about to go into chaos.
I think so. And coffee, that came up. Actually, Tripp brought the fact that coffee is about to be in a world of hurt. I'm about to stock up on my coffee and cigarettes, and I'm good. Dave, I want your input on this.
In regards to the wall?
Oh, in regards to distraction.
Well, I mean, as far as the wall is concerned, being up here in Canada, you just be prepared for the amount of shrubs we're going to put up on the 49th parallel. But nonetheless, in regards to distraction from the topic at large, I really do believe that what is happening is there is some sort of understanding of what is going on. They are making people more comfortable with the topics because that is kind of what they have to do in order to start getting the message out. Let's remember, I mean, if we're sticking on the topics of UFOs here for a second, all right, To the Stars Academy, everybody gives them credit. And for certain amounts, they do deserve credit. I don't agree with a lot of the things that To the Stars Academy has done. I've gone on record with that. However, there is a lot of good things that have come from them. They've pressed the issue. They've made sure that nobody's making fun of these stories on news networks anymore, which is fantastic. They've brought the subject to a mainstream light, and we have to thank them for that. But when you look at shows like Blue Book, you look at shows like The Return of X-Files, you look at shows that are out there, Space Force, if you want to include that as well, news stories like the pilots in Ireland from Virgin Airlines who reported these UFO sightings back in October, I believe. The public is getting ready. They are warming up. As Grant Cameron likes to say, and Michael, you've probably heard Grant say this, it's not about disclosure right now. It's about confirmation. Get people used to the subject. I mean, as far as some sort of alien invasion or anything along those lines coming to fruition, it could happen. It could very well happen, depending on the way disclosure goes or the way they want it to go. If they want some sort of mass hysteria, they will throw it in there. Okay? Look what's happened to the Muslim community. It's the exact same thing. Everybody is fearful of the Muslim community. Is that mass hysteria or is it truth? At this point, I don't think anybody really knows. You know, but, I mean, we look at Westerners, good, Middle Easterners, bad, Eastern people, good, right? So it could very well be that there is some sort of distraction going on, but does it tie to covering up UFOs? I'm not sure. I don't think so. I think this world has bigger problems than they do about worrying about something that is very easily covered up when they put it right in front of you.
Right. So, Chris, go ahead, Cole.
I will say it does kind of make sense for them to do a slow level of disclosure over time. Because if you honestly look at the world today, we can't even handle a celebrity couple breaking up. What would we do if they just said aliens are real?
Okay, well, what about this theory, guys? And I've heard this from about 6 different sources. And some people may believe it, some may not. All right? That we all make fun of the National Enquirer. All right? We all make fun of it.
Mm-hmm.
However, there are sources out there, Michael Schratt being one of them, who will state that, do you remember that scene? I'm going to put it this way. Does everybody remember that scene in the original Men in Black where Tommy Lee Jones takes Will Smith to the newsstand and he grabs the National Enquirer and Star Magazine and all these gossip garbage magazines, right?
Yep.
Well, there's a line in there where Tommy says, "This is where we put out the information. We put it out to the public because nobody believes it." Right. Well, there are a number of high-profile researchers out there who believe that that's exactly what the DIA, the CIA, the NSA, and all of these different groups have actually been doing in order to get the UFO message out there.
And that's very possible. Would I pick up the Enquirer and believe everything I read out of it? Probably not. But I might look at it and do a little more research into some of the stories and see if there's any fact behind it.
Oh, yeah. But, I mean, if you all of a sudden see a UFO story on, say, page 12 of the National Enquirer that has a cover basically saying, "I gave birth to Bigfoot's love child," you're not gonna believe anything in there.
No.
You know what I'm saying? But it's intriguing how that works. It's very intriguing how it works because they do get the message out. It's just a matter of how do they get the message.
So, Chris,
I do got to say on that.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I just wanted to get Chris's input.
With what he was saying, like with bringing up the Men in Black, being a new guy into the whole UFO world.
Welcome.
It is amazing, considering I grew up with those movies and thinking that they were kind of a spoof thing. I had no idea how much documentation there is about the group, the Men in Black, and how much of it actually predates those movies. Like, it is amazing how much documentation there is about them.
Well, even in Blue Book, they kind of, you can take it either as the cigarette smoking man out of X-Files, or you can take it as kind of their portrayal of the Men in Black in Blue Book. Either or.
Oh, it's definitely the Men in Black that they're using there in Blue Book, which is very fascinating.
It is. That
they bring that out in this dramatic television series as well. As a matter of fact, now that we're talking about the Men in Black, the very first sighting report of a man in black was at the Maury Island incident right here in the state of Washington. As a matter of fact, before Roswell, New Mexico, before Kenneth Arnold the Maury Island incident happened in South Puget Sound and just off the coast of Burien there. And part of that story was when those 5 donut-shaped saucers were sighted over this tugboat that dropped this molten slag onto the boat and killed the boat owner's dog and injured
Mr.
the boat.
Dahl, was it not?
Yeah. It was Harold Dahl.
Yep.
Was his name. He was the boat captain. And it injured his 12-year-old son's arm. He had to take to the hospital as well. But before he even told anyone about what his sighting was, he was visited early the next morning by the first Men in Black guy with the hat, the fedora, the suit, the whole thing, telling him that he probably shouldn't tell anybody what he just saw, which was totally amazing. No one even heard about what he saw yet. And this government official or Men in Black, whatever you want to call them, knew about it at that point. So the state of Washington is about ground zero for everything paranormal when you're talking UFOs, Bigfoot, Men in Black. It all happened and started right here in our Pacific Northwest, the state of Washington.
Well, even, and I'll bring this up, even haunting cases, have always been here with downtown Seattle in the 1920s, with Thornwood Castle, which was the site of Rose Red. Yeah, so Washington State's got every aspect of the paranormal. I don't think we have Mothman, but we have everything else. Sticking with Maury Island just for a real brief second, what's fascinating too about that is they actually pulled Kenneth Arnold into that case because I believe he had his sighting like 3 days after the Maury Island incident. Was it not? Or it might have been a week?
Yeah, it was basically a week before.
Yeah.
And and you're exactly right, Coop. This was so fascinating. Kenneth Arnold's sighting happened after Maury Island, but Kenneth Arnold became a national figure at that point. For some reason, his story really made the press. What happened was Fate magazine that we're talking about earlier was the premier paranormal mystery magazine that people would buy. And Fate magazine wanted to do a story on Kenneth Arnold's sighting report, of course. So they hired him and they did an article on his story. But then Kenneth Arnold at the time told the gentleman at Fate magazine, guess what? Mine wasn't the first. There was the Maury Island incident the week before mine. And so they actually hired Kenneth Arnold to investigate the Maury Island incident. And he went back and talked with Harold Dahl and some other mysterious people, at least one of them anyway, but a gentleman by the name of Chrisman, who seems to have in the background of a lot of other black ops programs, including possibly even the JFK assassination issue. He was involved all the way through this himself. But they actually had, that's when the Army Air Force split apart into the Army and the Air Force when this slag or this material from the UFO was recovered off of Harold Dahl's boat. The military showed up with Kenneth Arnold to do the interview, and they took the slag and tried to fly it out to Wright-Patterson, and they crashed. That was the very first U.S. Air Force crash.
It crashed in
Oregon? And it happened in eastern Washington, actually.
Oh, did it? Okay.
That's where it went down.
Okay. I thought it was Oregon. You hear different reports of it.
Yes. So anyway, we are embroiled in this area in all of those fascinating things, including Kenneth Arnold becoming interested in investigating for the U.S. Air Force the Maury Island incident.
Mm-hmm. And Going back to Blue Book, I wonder if they're going to do an episode on Maury Island. If they'll do, back cases and bring it up. Because I believe they started off in 52, did they not?
Yes. I sincerely doubt that they probably will add that. If they want to stay, they have 12,000 cases in Project Blue Book alone to cover if they want.
Mm-hmm.
The Air Force officers who were investigating the Maury Island incident weren't a part of Blue Book or Grudge or Sign or anything like that at that point. So I'm sure there were intelligence officers involved in some program. That's why they sent them out there. But I don't think Project Blue Book would probably get into that. They've got plenty other fish to fry at this point.
I got a question for the panel.
Go ahead.
The last episode, the Flatwoods Monster.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think was underneath the tarp? What's the second piece they pulled out of there?
I think that was the crash.
Bothered me so much.
I think it was the crashed craft. It was UFO shaped.
Mm-hmm.
Or was it the body?
No, I think it was. I think it was the craft. I don't think they ever recovered the body because it was never the portrayal, and even in the case files, they never found. They never. There was already wreckage when the kids encountered this creature that they called an owl. Well, it wasn't an owl, but there was never a body to recover. There would, however, have been a craft, and if you looked at the shape of what was on that flatbed, it was somewhat circular shaped.
Yeah.
So I think the creature disappeared, went about its merry way, found its way back to where it came from. I have no idea. They never really went back to that. Even in the case files, it was never seen again. So what I find intriguing too with this show is the portrayal. You look at the circular table that these mysterious guys are sitting around, and I see that as MJ-12 or Magi.
Exactly.
Which is cool because MJ-12 really existed. Dr. Hynek really existed. So if you want a fact-based drama, that's the one. And I think that's the smoking gun of TV shows that people need to be paying attention to. What's your thoughts, Dave? You've been quiet over there.
Oh, I'm just listening to you guys. With my schedule, I hate to be a little bit obtuse here, but I have absolutely no knowledge of the television show because A, I don't have cable, and B, I'm usually working when it is on, so I don't get to watch it anyways.
Okay, for our listeners that have not seen it yet, because I don't have History Channel either, I go to the History Channel website. Just Google History Channel, go to the website, and they have the episodes right there for you to watch. That's how I watch it. I don't get to watch
For free?
it. Huh? Yeah, it's free.
For free?
For free.
Awesome.
The first episode was on YouTube. It was on their YouTube channel, but they took it off. But now it is on the History Channel website. Just go to, I think it's historychannel.com, and you're going to see Project Blue Book pop right up. I tried to post it in the chat room. It wouldn't let me. So, yeah, it still won't let me. But just Google History Channel. You can watch both episodes. It airs every Tuesday night. I'm not going to put the times because, time zones, and we're an international show. But by all means, it's a show worth watching. And I'm going to wrap up the Blue Book portion. We're at the bottom, the last half hour of the show. I want to hit on this MUFON topic. And I'm going to let Dave go ahead and take the lead on that one.
Well, yesterday morning I was sent a letter by Chris Cogswell, who's a former director of research for MUFON, who quit the group back in April of 2018 because of finding out information that John Ventry, the former Pennsylvania State MUFON director, had made racial comments on his Facebook page, and then was still subsequently, after being forced to step down from that position due to his comments, had continued working behind the scenes. So Chris, who is also the Spaced Out Radio Scientist and a guest on our monthly show that we call Reality Paranormal, sent me this note from a gentleman named Philip Leach, who is someone who is currently with MUFON, but wrote a scathing letter to MUFON members that was produced on January 17th, which was Thursday, basically released to the public yesterday, regarding some major concerns about the internal happenings of the UFO organization. Now, this is a group that is headed by a gentleman named Jan Harzan, who, from all intents and purposes, from what I have heard, is a pretty good dude. All right, I have never spoken to him, nor have I interviewed him. I have interviewed colleagues, such as Board Director Tom Whitmore. I've interviewed Board Director Chase Klutsky before, and I've been pretty critical of MUFON in the way they seem to do things at their own merit. And some people like it, some people do not. But this new letter that absolutely just came out, which was very, very intense indeed, is very intriguing for a lot of people, because it tells about some of the inner workings that MUFON is doing these days. For instance, and this is a big one for me, and Michael, I'd be curious to get your portion on this. In this letter by Philip Leach, he states, in no particular order, his concerns. All right? And number one that he put on there is that, and I'm going to read this, he goes, I have found that some investigators are having extensive background checks run on witnesses when they submit a report. Some of these background checks are more than typical. In such instances, a report will be closed without speaking or emailing a witness due to results from a background check. Only doing a random case check, I have found several with comments surrounding these findings, which include violent criminal acts, child molesting, and one report showing a comprehensive list of medications a witness is using with side effects from these medicines. Documenting this in a database open to many individuals within MUFON could possibly violate HIPAA laws. I addressed these issues with the executive director, Jan Harzan, along with Director of Investigations, Chase Klutsky, weeks ago, and at the time of this letter, the information is still attached to these reports. I told both Jan and Chase of the possible legal ramifications this could have, with no avail, it seems. With the small amount of reports I looked at, it is hard to judge how many reports or states are following this practice. In short, if there is a criminal background check result or criminal background result found, no contact or email will be sent to a witness, as the investigator clearly states in these reports, and the case will be closed as information only or insufficient information. I guess it is possible there were permissions given to some states. I then question who is paying for this service. If this is a common acceptable practice, it is my hope MUFON trains its field investigators properly in this area and documents this guideline in its State Director Field Investigator Manual. Now, the concern I have with this, Michael, and I'm curious to get your opinion, people need to know that if they submit a report to MUFON, that they are going to get a criminal background check. They are going to get a health check. Now, let's say, hypothetically, that 12 years ago, I spent 2 years in prison because I got in a bar fight and I hurt a guy pretty bad. All right? Does that mean that even though I saw a black triangle over my house and aliens in the background, does that mean that my report is no good because I spent time in prison? And what knowledge does MUFON gain from understanding on a criminal record check? Because whether you've done extremely shady, and trust me, I don't want to deal with any sick bastards, whether or not, you know, they've abused children or raped women or anything like that. I think it's disgusting, and you shouldn't follow up. But in the relevancy of the report, what does their criminal record have to do with seeing a potential UFO or landing or anything of those sorts?
Yeah, it is quite concerning for sure. This is a really shocking document that you've got here, Dave, and I appreciate you bringing it up to my attention for sure. Now let's just go through the idea of what we're talking about here with this Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. That's the HIPAA Act that everyone talks about, where basically if you have healthcare information, the portability or the sharing of that information is highly regulated. And basically the healthcare community is not able to publish that information. Matter of fact, I think some people will corroborate this, that even if you're married and your spouse has a doctor's appointment, or your children, let's put it that way, have a checkup that they need to have done, it's very difficult even to get this information about your own loved ones if they don't sign waivers, if they're over a certain age, and it's well below the age of majority, by the way, and even though you're married to a spouse, those informations are confidential as well.
HIPAA itself is federal. Now, the age of consent, I believe, is dictated by state. Like in Washington, you can't admit your 14-year-old to psychiatric. It all depends also on which exact area of the hospital or medical care is needed. But HIPAA itself, yes, I can call and make my spouse a doctor appointment, no problem. Now, can I access my spouse's medical records? No. They won't. They will not release any information by the HIPAA Act.
Exactly.
Every hospital has a form you have to sign.
Right. Now,
personally,
now if your spouse or your child, a 14-year-old, signs the consent form that yes, and they usually have a list. These are the people that have authorization to all of my medical care, and they put your name down. If you're not on that list, you're not going to find anything out unless they're violating the HIPAA Act.
But that's for each hospital too.
It is. Each hospital is bound independently by the HIPAA Act. You can't just sign a HIPAA Act in one hospital and have the other hospital, they have to do their own. And regardless, you're not going to find anything out, regardless of which hospital you call.
Well, gentlemen, there were 12 points, and Chris, sorry. There were 12 points made on this, including the special assignment team, which, if anybody knows, okay, MUFON is supposed to be very, very open with their files. You can go on their website, check out all their files for free. However, what most people do not know is if they send out their SAT team, their special assignment team, those reports are kept hidden from the public.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Why? Why are they hidden? So you're telling me if this SAT team, say, runs into a close encounters of the third kind situation, that is not getting out to the public. Yet MUFON prides itself on being very open with their reports. So why do you have a secretive team?
They work for Bigelow, maybe?
Well, I think, you know what? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, we can throw up all sorts of estimations as to why they are doing it. But the reality is, where is that information going? Why are they storing that information? And let's say, if there is ET contact, why is that not going out to the public? Isn't that MUFON's goal?
That was supposed to be their goal. And I'll bring this up. I've brought it up on the show before. I was with MUFON as a field investigator trainee back in the 90s. I left MUFON after a year because of what I saw, and after talking to the other investigators that had been with MUFON, they were nothing but a debunking agency back then. They treated their experiencers like crap. They debunked abductions. They didn't even handle abduction cases. And that was back in the 90s. Have they gotten better? I don't know. I have a couple state directors that I do talk to and work with. FMP works with them. And from him, each state director can work and handle their particular MUFON for their state independently, based on how they want to run it. And you're right. There are some outstanding folks in MUFON. I think the problem comes from the headquarters.
Absolutely, it does. Absolutely, it does. I'm just kind of scanning through. We caught through Spaced Out Radio, and there's a lot of talk in here about their press person, a gentleman by the name of Roger Marsh, their media director. We caught him in a blatant lie that I have brought up with Chase Klotsky on the air. I brought up just a week ago with Tom Whitmore on the air, where we had one of our listeners email MUFON, their PR guy, Roger Marsh, stating, has MUFON at any time taken or traded financial income for information? And he said, absolutely not. It has never happened. Well, we all know it has happened with Robert Bigelow.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, this gentleman has apparently been holding MUFON a little bit hostage in his contract negotiations with certain things. And, MUFON is covering things up, and it isn't good. They talk about the scientific way of doing things. Like I said, there's 12 points in this letter. And Eric, I've sent you a copy of it. So if you want to release that on your Forest Moon Paranormal page for any of your listeners to read up on that, they'd be more than willing. Go for it. Why not?
I will.
Right.
So for all
why not? I think.
So for all of our FMP members, I will be releasing that tonight, so you can read it for yourself.
Good.
Now, I have also talked with another member of MUFON who received this letter, and I'm going to keep this person anonymous because I'd like to protect my sources, who said absolutely 100% everything in this letter is true. Everything.
And, I'm going to be blunt. I've had a bad taste in my mouth with MUFON for years. With the exception of a few state directors that I do work with and talk to. And that's based from the 90s. But if you're going to treat your experiencers like crap, and, that's bad business in this field for one. But is this going to hurt the UFO community as a whole? Personally, I don't think so, because we have NUFORC, we have National UFO Reporting Center, and we have Filer's Files, the other UFO Reporting Center, that I think will pick up the slack and always have. MUFON being international, could it hurt us? I don't think so. That's just my opinion, though.
Well, I want to read something else because it also gets into the John Ventry saga. Okay, so for people who do not know who John Ventry is, this is a gentleman who was the Pennsylvania State Director. John Ventry made all of his money. He's a multimillionaire, money that any of us could ever dream of. All right, he's like uber rich. He made his money years ago with him and his buddy perfecting the patent of the hydraulic wood splitter. And anyways, long story short, Mr. Ventry, back in late 2017, early 2018, made a very controversial and racial comment on his Facebook page and was subsequently relieved of his duties as Pennsylvania State Director. However, it was later found out by Chris Cogswell, our resident scientist, that he resigned over Ventry's comments because Ventry was still helping out with symposiums behind the scenes. So in this letter with Phil Leach, in section 6, it says, some time ago, Mr. Ventry's racial comments were a concern to say the least. So why the hesitation to remove him from his position? The hidden truth was money. Mr. Ventry actually is listed under the 501c3 stats because MUFON has a lab in Pennsylvania. Upon inspection, this lab is at his residence. Yep, along with MUFON 501c3 records showing an income at that location. So he has on his own nonprofit, he has his own nonprofit using the MUFON name. Now, you know the hesitation in removing him, money. Mr. Ventry at the time was treasurer of several states, according to Jan Harzan and Chase Klutsky, retaining a bank account with a substantial amount of money. According to the DOI, which is Director of Investigations, which is Chase Klutsky, this continues to this day. This is not speculation. The facts are available, and I am sure MUFON would be more than happy to release this information if asked. So here we have a gentleman who took a lot of heat about being racist towards the African-American community, still involved with MUFON. Now, my question is, and Michael, you might be best to ask this, usually when CEOs do not deal with this kind of problem and there's still uproar, usually it costs the CEO his job. But in this case, Jan seems to be Teflon.
Yeah. It's, it's one of those subjects that you don't really know the details of, and we're only getting certain information out. And so it's fascinating to me that you've actually come out with this brand new, very controversial internal memo. This is the thing that's actually confirming some of these fears that we've had. Whether it's Venturi or anything else that has been controversial in the past, It seems now that we have confirmation that there's some stuff going on right now that still needs some work. So that's what is really puzzling.
And I
one of the things
I do want to bring up real quick for legality's sake, this has been released to the public. It's not just an internal memo. It has been released to the public. We're not releasing information that's still, for lack of a better term, classified within internal channels. It's been released to the public already. We're not releasing it right now, first time, really.
Dave, tell me again Dave, tell me again the information on the gentleman that wrote this. He's not with MUFON anymore, or he is?
No. He his name is Phil Leach. He's director, case review team. He's also the associate producer of MUFON Media. Now, it says here at the end of the letter, I have not embellished any part of this letter. I have stated to the best of my knowledge what I know for the truth as told to me. This information was shared directly with me by MUFON executive staff. Of course, there is always more to the story. At this point, clarification to the membership is something that is needed. No one needs to take my word for this. Ask those questions. Look for the truth. Ask for change and expect it. Most of all, protect that which we believe in. Stand up for those who can't. I continue my job as director of the case review team with positive results and no complaints. The only way change takes effect is to make all of those involved informed. I have been dedicated to the future of MUFON from day one, making positive changes along the way. It is my hope that this letter will be a warning to those in MUFON. Question what is not right, continues to search for the truth. Clearly, changes need to be made. Now it is a matter of whether those that are capable of making those changes are willing to do so. I am sure the membership would like a statement from the board of directors, as many of these concerns involve MUFON finances. At this point, constructed statements from executive staff will only be an attempt to diminish the seriousness of the concerns stated above.
Wow.
So he wrote this 3 days ago.
Yes.
Did he release it that day, or did he release it like yesterday?
I have no idea. He wrote this on, or I'm going to assume submitted this on January 17th, which was 2 days ago or 2.25 days ago, and it came to my attention and has been put on social media as of yesterday morning.
Well, it seems like he's got good intentions to try to get things fixed, but I kind of fear for him now.
Well, I mean, you can look at it that way, but I mean, he is taking a stance against a very, very tough organization that seems confused with the way they want to do things. One of the things that I did find very intriguing that was missing in this report was that there is a relationship now between the To the Stars Academy and MUFON. That was brought forward in July on Coast to Coast AM with George Knapp hosting when Jan Harzan joined Luis Elizondo from the To the Stars Academy on the show. And about an hour and a half into the show, they started actually talking about how MUFON and To the Stars Academy are actually sharing information. Now, my big question is, and the question that I have, and I just want an answer to it, is this. Explain to me what a publicly funded nonprofit company like MUFON, or society, pardon me, is doing with a private venture like To the Stars Academy. Are they trading information? Are they trading sources? Are they trading confidentiality agreements that the public allegedly signs before they give their information out? It is dangerous because MUFON has always prided itself on being the public awareness to UFOs. Now you're dealing with a private company that is literally stocked with ex-spooks and black ops directors that have allegedly gone public, however, still hold major top secret clearance within the United States government, including Luis Elizondo himself, who ran the ATIP program between 2010 and 2012 up until 2017 under a different name until he resigned by going to join the To the Stars Academy. This is dangerous. This is very dangerous for the public because what it does do is it does help that entire group control the UFO narrative. And that is not good for getting the information out there to the public.
And, you know, coming from the FMP perspective, we pride ourselves in confidentiality. So I completely agree. Where is the confidentiality agreements between MUFON and To the Stars? Are their clients aware that they are sharing information?
Well, according to Tom Whitmore, when he was on Spaced Out Radio with me on January 10th, he says there is no written agreement as far as he knows between the To the Stars Academy and MUFON. They're just kind of helping each other out, scanning each other's information, kind of like, Eric, I'm not a part of Forest Moon Paranormal, but if you wanted my opinion on a piece of information, you would come to me and say, hey, Dave, what do you think about this case? That's the way he said it is happening. However, that does not equal to what Jan Harzan and Luis Elizondo stated when they were on Coast to Coast AM. So with Tom Whitmore, who used to run a $220 million financing company out of the state of Texas, I asked him point blank, should the board not be concerned that the CEO is making these types of decisions regarding UFOs in cases without discussing it with the board? He did not really have a good answer for that.
Hey, Dave. Some of the listeners, if they didn't know about MUFON, they got a lot of information out of that letter. But what if some of the listeners don't know what this To the Stars is? Could you give a real brief description of what that is?
The To the Stars Academy was formed a couple of years ago, but didn't become real public until October 11th, 2017, when Tom DeLonge met with 5 members of his team in a press conference in Seattle, Washington. However, they held a press conference without any members of the media present. It was a live stream that went on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. They are a group that says that they are committed to bringing the understanding of ufology to the public in efforts of disclosure. They want to do that in 3 forms. They want to do it on the scientific form, they want to do it on the public form, and they want to do it through Hollywood and media. So, for instance, movies, books, documentaries, etc. So they are trying to, they were also, they have a power team. Okay, for the best way I can describe it for people who are not informed, okay, they are like the O.J. Simpson's lawyer team of ufologists. Okay, we're talking people who ran Lockheed Skunk Works, where they developed Black Op programs. We're talking people who have worked with Robert Bigelow at Skinwalker Ranch and through the NIDS organization. We're talking Luis Elizondo, who ran the ATIP program that the government funded for $22 million or $24 million, which was brought forward in that New York Times article. So there is a lot going on in regards to this.
Yeah.
Exactly. And folks, we're down to 4 minutes to the end of the show. So I want to start wrapping things up here. Anyone got any last comments?
Well, there's been some breaking news here tonight, so this is a fascinating show.
It is, and disturbing at the same time. But, to be honest, facts that we've all kind of suspected, and like you said, the truth comes out. It always does. And folks, if you haven't seen Blue Book, make sure you check out the first 2 episodes on the History Channel's website. And if you have the History Channel at your house, it's on Tuesday nights. So, I want to thank our panel tonight, Cole Wegleitner of the FMP Culture and Lore Research Specialist and owner of Statement of Sound DJ Services. Where can we find Statement of Sound DJ Services, Cole? Cole, you still with us?
Oh, hey, sorry about that.
There you are.
I'm there. Yeah. I thought I was live. You can find us at Facebook at www.facebook.com/SOSDJPro.
Oh, right. And Chris Dodge, our Extended Care Specialist. When's our next class, Chris? It's April, right? If you want to be in the Extended Care team, that's the team that educates our clients on how to take their home back after a paranormal incident.
Take your home and life back.
Exactly. When's our next class going to be for those that want to join the team?
In April. Don't know the date yet, but in April.
Okay. So just make sure, for those that have a paranormal incident or issue, you can find Forest Moon Paranormal on Facebook. Just go to Forest Moon, just look for Forest Moon Paranormal on Facebook. Make sure you join the group, not the page. So our Keith Andrews had to leave early. He was having technical issues. I couldn't get him called back in. I'm very sorry, Keith. He was in the chat room. You can find Keith on YouTube. Look for our Keith Andrews. He also has 2 books you can find. Dave Scott, Spaced Out Radio. Where can we find your show, Dave?
Thank you for having me on. Everybody can find it at spacedoutradio.com. You can follow me on Twitter at spacedoutradio, as well as on Facebook. You can join our page at Spaced Out Radio as well on Facebook.
And you got a new store.
And we got a brand new store on the website. So yes, pick up your swag there.
He sells socks.
We got socks. We got socks.
So, also on that, for S4, go to our S4 website, www.s-4radio.com, and we will have a store hopefully sometime before the end of the month. And we might even have socks. I don't know. I don't know why I'm fixated on socks, but I am. And lastly, we have Michael Hall of UFOI Team and our FMP lawyer. And where can we find UFOI Team, Michael?
Oh, thank you. We have UFOIteam.com as well, which talk about stores. We've got a brand new UFOI Team baseball cap that you would not believe on our store at the website. So check that out. And UFOI Team on Facebook as well. Thanks.
You got to bring me a cap. I need a cap. So as always, you can catch S4 on Night Dreams Talk Radio every Sunday at midnight PST to 2 a.m. and KSVU 90.1 FM Saturdays from 10 to 12. Next week we'll be having our first monthly roundtable of the year. Don't miss it, where we all bring questions to the table and I'll share our thoughts. No one knows what the questions our group's going to bring to the table. It's always blind and it's always a great show. So thank you again for listening to S4. Keep your eyes to the skies. Remember, it's you, our listeners, that gives us a reason to produce S4. Stay safe and see you next week.